In this presentation, we will review the major phases of an acquirer EMV migration project. If you have not already done so, please view our presentation titled An Introduction to EMV Part 5, which covers general project management guidelines. In the general project management presentation, we discussed the importance of defining your business drivers. Why are you doing this project? Are you doing only what is required to comply with the global payment network mandates and avoid potential liability? Or are you laying the foundation for emerging payment trends and technologies? The answer will allow you to scope your project. You need to know what you are trying to achieve. Here are the key dates announced by the global payment networks that you need to be aware of. Black text indicates a mandate. Green text indicates a waiver. Red text indicates a liability shift, which means that if a transaction is found to be counterfeit card fraud, the non-EMV compliant party will likely be responsible for the fraud loss. If you want to avoid potential fraud losses, pay close attention to the liability shift dates. Please note that this information is current as of July 2013, but is subject to change by the global payment networks. In this presentation, we will assume that in order to support EMV, your project will include upgrading or replacing terminals, modifying application software, performing internal testing, and certifying your changes. Everyone's situation may be just a little bit different, so the information here is very general. Some of it may not apply to your project, and you may have additional tasks that are not covered here. As we discussed in the general project presentation, you need to define the type of interfaces your terminals will support. Today, you support magnetic stripe cards. At point-of-sale devices, you may also support contactless magnetic stripe cards. With EMV, you may decide to support contact EMV only or contact EMV plus contactless EMV. All of these options are available at the point of sale. There are very few ATMs in the world today that support contactless functionality, and those that do typically support contactless magnetic stripe, not contactless EMV. The point is, you need to decide what you will support right away and what you might want to support later so you can lay the proper foundation with your initial EMV project. Will you offer the same functions for magnetic stripe cards and chip cards? For example, maybe you will offer PIN change at the ATM for chip cards but not for magnetic stripe cards. Or you may offer a particular option only to your cardholders. The terminal will need to display the appropriate transaction selections based on service code or the bin on the card and potentially the fit table in the ATM. One of the key tasks for an acquirer is to take inventory of the terminals they currently have. As a result of mergers and acquisitions, many institutions have quite an assortment of terminals from various manufacturers. You will need to look at each one. If it is an ATM, what type of card reader does it have? Swipe, dip, or motorized? You can typically add a chip card reader to your existing motorized reader if it does not already have the chip reader component. Swipe readers cannot read a chip, so you will have to replace an ATM's swipe reader with a dip or motorized reader that supports chip. If the ATM has a dip reader, make sure it has the EMV component that allows the reader to trap the chip card and hold it for the duration of the transaction. Your point-of-sale device will still need a swipe reader for cards that only have a magnetic stripe, but the device must also have a place for the cardholder to insert a contact chip card and leave it there for the duration of the transaction. If you want to accept chip cards with contactless interfaces, your point-of-sale device must have a contactless card reader. This can be integrated into the POS device or added on as a separate component. Find out if each terminal has already passed EMVCO Level 1 certification, which covers the card reader and the PIN pad if one is present. This certification is performed by the hardware vendor. Find out what operating system, firmware, and software version each terminal is currently running. The EMV software kernel you will get from your hardware vendor must pass EMVCO Level 2 certification. Make sure you obtain proof of this certification from your hardware vendor. What communications protocol are you using? TCP/IP is not required for EMV, but whatever protocol you use, make sure it supports the longer EMV messages. As you take inventory, you may discover that some terminals have already been upgraded or replaced as part of another project, such as ADA, and may now contain many of the components needed for EMV. Find out what terminals may already be scheduled for other upgrades or replacement over the next few years. You may want to use the EMV migration project as an opportunity to do that upgrade or replacement. You will most likely find that there are some terminals that do not support EMV. Either the hardware is outdated, or the terminal does not have all of the necessary components, or the software does not support EMV. Depending on the situation, you will need to decide whether to upgrade the terminal or replace it. Does your institution have any preferences for the makes or models of terminals that you support? Your institution may have been through mergers and acquisitions, so your terminals may be from many different vendors. Review the current service and software maintenance agreements. This may be an opportunity to consolidate brand and type, especially if you work with one vendor that you prefer over another. Fewer combinations of make, model, and software kernel mean fewer certifications to perform. Your vendor may also give you a price break if you have more of their terminals. Upgrading an ATM is typically cheaper than replacing it, but upgrading is not always an option. Older ATMs may be very expensive to upgrade due to the scarcity or cost of components. Your current terminals may not support all of the new features you want to offer. You may be able to use the EMV project to replace a device with one that provides more services in the same location. It is expensive to replace an ATM, but if it is necessary, decide whether you want to replace it with a similar model that supports EMV, or will you use this opportunity to purchase a different model that not only supports EMV, but also allows you to offer additional features and functions. Consider associated costs for infrastructure and communications. If the new ATM is not exactly the same size and shape as its predecessor, you may face structural changes. Typically, you would replace a point-of-sale device rather than upgrading it. Fortunately, most point-of-sale devices that have been sold in the United States over the past couple of years are EMV capable. That is, they have the slot where the chip card can be inserted, and they can be upgraded with the necessary software. Merchants have several options for point-of-sale terminals. A merchant may want a standalone device, which may have an external PIN pad, or the merchant may need an integrated solution. In this case, the register will need software changes. Some vendors are offering a semi-integrated solution, which they may refer to as EMV Easy. This option is for merchants who do not want to deal with EMV details. The PIN pad has the processing power and the software to prompt the customer and communicate with the acquirer host system. The register receives a simple response from the host. This solution is PCI compliant because the card data is not stored in the register. Large merchants may want to invest in a multimedia terminal that has EMV and NFC capability. Because an EMV transaction can take a few seconds longer than a magnetic stripe transaction, this offers the merchant an opportunity to display advertising or coupon offers while the customer is waiting for their transaction to complete. Merchants and acquirers will of course factor cost, functionality, and space limitations into their purchasing decisions. We have been talking about upgrading or replacing terminals in production, but don't forget your test lab. Figure out what you really need in your lab for testing. You will not have the budget or the space for every make and model of terminal you would like to test with. You will also have to keep some terminals as magnetic stripe only for regression testing and production support. Get estimates from your vendors. Find out how long it is going to take to get parts and service. Make sure you have floor space in your lab for what's coming in. You will need to use simulators to test many combinations of hardware and software, and also to test new configurations and loads before you actually send them down to a real device. Your development team may have a lot of work to do. Analyze your current online transaction processing software. Make sure it supports EMV. You may need to migrate your software to a later version that supports EMV. Don't forget to look at batch reporting and back office systems. Do you exchange files with upstream or downstream connectors? Do those file formats need to change to include EMV data? Who will you need to test with? Who will you be certifying your changes with? Once a terminal has a chip card reader, that does not mean it can automatically generate an EMV transaction. You must load it with the appropriate EMV kernel that supports the card schemes and applications from the networks you are affiliated with. Although a terminal may come with a default configuration for EMV, you will likely want to add to the list of EMV tags that terminal supports and the tags the terminal sends to the acquirer host in a transaction request. You may need to configure terminal action codes. There will be changes to the receipt file. For example, EMVCO mandates that the AID must be printed on all receipts associated with EMV transactions. If your ATMs use states and screens technology, you will need to modify your state flow to include EMV-related states, and you will need the associated screens. Are you planning to support offline authentication or offline PIN verification at the point-of-sale devices? If so, your terminals will need additional keys and certificates for those functions. Contact your payment association representative for guidance with this part of your project. As part of your development and configuration effort, look for things you can do to help the cardholder. Because chip technology will be new to most people, it will be important to provide as much assistance to the cardholder as possible. Show them the correct way to insert the card through diagrams and arrows. Make sure that any messages displayed on and around the terminal are meaningful and helpful. And you will want to display a transaction processing please wait screen for the time period where the chip card and the terminal are interacting, so the cardholder will know something is happening and they will not attempt to cancel the transaction at this point. If you use ATM monitoring software, you will need to make sure it can recognize any new log messages related to EMV. You will need to have procedures in place to handle the new scenarios related to EMV. Troubleshooting problems with chip transactions is significantly more challenging than troubleshooting problems involving magnetic stripe cards. This is because there's so much that happens between the card and the terminal, and because of all the extra data carried in an EMV transaction. Make sure you know how to retrieve and understand any logs and traces your terminals provide. Check with your vendor for more information. With all of these changes, you can see that QA is probably the most important function of your EMV project. Regression testing is vital. You will also have many combinations of chip and magnetic stripe technologies that you will need to test. Simulators can fill the gaps with virtual cards, simulated devices, and networks. There may be internal and external documentation that you will need to update. Certainly there will be changes to documents such as network specifications, internal and external test plans, or certification documents. When marketing EMV to your partners and your customers, it is important to emphasize the positive. You will want to advertise chip technology in a way that makes it seem exciting and desirable. You could emphasize enhanced security, interoperability, and new services or features. In addition to providing guidance for customers at unattended terminals, it is also important to assist customers at attended terminals. This will require training for merchants and their staff. The project team must be able to transfer all of their hard-earned EMV knowledge to the production support team. The help desk will need to be trained to handle new types of questions. There are many certifications to be performed. As we mentioned earlier, you need to make sure your terminals are certified to be EMVCO Level 1 and Level 2 compliant by the vendor. It is the acquirer or terminal owner's responsibility to perform terminal level and network level certifications. Work with the global card payment networks to obtain the certification test plans and requirements. Here is the bigger picture of terminal certification. Your vendors are responsible for EMV-CO Level 1 and Level 2 certification. Once you have completed your development and terminal configuration, you will complete your internal testing and QA. This must be done prior to formal certifications because what you certify is what you must put into production. You will want to do pre-certification testing before you attempt formal certification with others. This will give you a better chance of passing the formal certification on your first try. Because these certifications are expensive and time-consuming, you do not want to do each one more than once. There are often several layers of formal certifications. First will be the testing of the terminal and the EMV kernel. Then you may have a functional certification with a network, followed by end-to-end testing. Some networks require that the final certification of a terminal must be performed when the terminal is connected to the production environment. Make sure you understand the specific requirements of each of the networks you connect to and must certify with. MasterCard, Visa, American Express, and Discover mandated that acquirers and processors must be able to support EMV data in online transactions as of April 2013. This was an important first step. Once your connection to these payment networks has been certified for EMV, you can begin the process of certifying terminals and rolling them into production. Once you are coming down to the finish line, you must be sure to notify the appropriate parties of your production dates. When you officially place a device in production, the payment network may offer a limited warranty period. If possible, start your production rollout with one device in a friendly location such as an employee cafeteria, someplace away from the public eye where your staff knows what is going on. Employees will be much more tolerant of any problems than the public might be. Make sure you have actual chip cards that you can use at the terminal once it is in production. We had a situation in Canada where we put an EMV-enabled ATM in an employee cafeteria. All of the employees had magnetic stripe cards, so we were able to use those at the ATM with no problem. Then, when we wanted to use a chip card, we discovered that we did not have a chip card since the bank had not yet issued chip cards in production. We had test chip cards, but not production chip cards. Finally, we did find an employee who had a chip card issued by another institution, and he was able to perform a transaction with his card at the ATM. When you are putting together your terminal rollout schedule, consider location and weather. You may not want to be installing new drive-up ATMs in northern Minnesota in January. Depending on the ATM software you use, you may be able to download all of the updates to your ATM, or this may require a site visit, since some ATM software does not allow you to install or update an EMV kernel remotely. If you have many ATMs to update with site visits, this will take a while and you will have lots of service charges. Remember that some global payment networks require that the final end-to-end certification must be done in production. So check with the networks that you connect to and whoever you are certifying with to make sure you understand their rules for final certification. Clearly, migrating to EMV is an expensive and lengthy project for an acquirer. You will want to start taking inventory and doing your analysis right away. Consider the possibility that you may have to wait for parts, terminals, or service once many other acquirers get into their EMV migration projects. Remember the key dates we showed earlier. And you really do not want to be one of the last to migrate to EMV. Those who wait will very likely become special targets for criminals as they focus their efforts on those who have not migrated to EMV. So, start now and good luck. We hope this presentation has been helpful. Paragon is a leading provider of e-payment simulation, configuration, and testing software solutions. We offer professional services including EMV training. We have over 590 customers in more than 85 countries. For more information about our products and services, contact us using one of the links shown here.